The nanny was fired without explanation. But what the mafia boss's daughter revealed left everyone in shock. The suitcase hit the floor when she heard the words that would change everything. Emma Sullivan never imagined that after 3 years of caring for little Charlie, she would be let go without a single reason. She gathered her belongings, desperately trying to hide the tears that kept streaming down her face. No one understood what had happened, until the mafia boss's daughter whispered something into her father's ear, and what she revealed completely shattered the most powerful man in Charleston. If you're enjoying this story, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this. Now, let's continue. The weight of injustice is heavier than any suitcase. Emma Sullivan walked down the stone steps of the main hall, counting each one as if numbers could make her forget what had just happened. 20 steps from the front door to the iron gate, 20 footfalls to leave behind 3 whole years of her life. The Charleston sunset washed the mansion's white colonial walls in a fierce amber gold. She thought of how she had always loved this hour, when light slanted through Charlie's bedroom window, and the two of them made animal shadows on the ceiling. A bird, a butterfly, a star. She didn't look back. If she did, she knew she'd cry, and she'd already cried too much in the servant's bathroom while packing. 3 pairs of jeans, 5 shirts, the pale blue dress she'd worn to Charlie's 4th birthday party, and the hairbrush Charlie loved to use to brush her doll's hair. The brush she left behind. It belonged to this house, to the life that was no longer hers. Rob was waiting beside the sleek black car, the door already open. He was a man of few words, but the way he looked at Emma now said everything. He didn't understand either. No one understood. And maybe that was for the best, because if anyone asked her for a reason, she wouldn't know how to answer. Alexander Thornton had simply called her into his study that morning and said, in a flat voice like he was reading a business report, that her services were no longer needed. No explanation, no warning, not even the courtesy of meeting her eyes. Emma got into the car and rested her forehead against the cold window glass. The mansion grew smaller in the rearview mirror, and with it the outline of everything she'd built over the past 3 years. She'd come here at 24, fresh out of a modest university with a degree in early childhood education, with no real experience beyond babysitting a niece during summer breaks. The employment agency had sent her almost at random, a temporary replacement that became permanent when Charlie, then only 2, refused to sleep with anyone but her. The car passed Waterfront Park, with its ancient oaks, and the fountain where Emma used to take Charlie to watch birds bathe on sweltering afternoons. Charlie loved tossing crumbs of bread and squealing with laughter as the sparrows fought for the best bite. Sometimes Alex would appear out of nowhere, slipping away from some meeting, and the 3 of them would sit on the wrought iron bench eating vanilla ice cream with caramel sauce. Rare moments, but precious ones, when that powerful man seemed to forget the numbers and meetings that ran his life, and simply be there, present with his daughter and the nanny who cared for her. The car went by the familiar ice cream shop, by old streets lined with pastel-painted houses, by the bridge spanning the Cooper River. Emma closed her eyes and let tears slide down in silence. These weren't tears of anger, though she had every right to be angry. These were tears of longing that started before the absence even truly began. She would miss the lavender scent of the fabric softener Maggie used on the sheets. She would miss the strong coffee Rob brewed every morning. She would miss Charlie's laughter ringing down the corridors when they played hide-and-seek. And she would miss, though she shouldn't, Alex's quiet presence at dinner on the nights he came home too late and found them already in pajamas watching cartoons in the living room. He always paused in the doorway, always watched for a few seconds before he spoke, and Emma always pretended not to notice, even as her heart beat faster whenever she felt his gaze. The car stopped in front of an aging building on the outskirts of Charleston. Emma got out, thanked Rob with a silent nod, then hauled her small suitcase up 3 flights of creaking stairs. Her rented room sat behind the home of a retired widow. A narrow single bed with faded sheets, a worn 2-burner stove, walls with peeling paint, and a small window looking out onto a dark alley. She sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the light. Darkness gathered around her like a cold blanket. 3 years. 3 years she had lived in light, in laughter, in the feeling of belonging somewhere. And now it all dissolved like a dream at daybreak. She looked down at her empty hands and wondered if it had all been an illusion. Had she ever truly belonged there? Or had she only been a stranger allowed in, then pushed out the moment she was no longer necessary? The tears came again, this time with no one watching, no one to hide them from. And in that small, dim room, Emma Sullivan wept for 3 years lost, for love that had never been given a name, and for the little girl she had loved like her own child but would never see again. Emma Sullivan had never known what family was. She was found in a cardboard box on the doorstep of St. Mary's Orphanage on the outskirts of Atlanta when she was only a few days old, with no name, no papers, no trace of the person who had brought her into the world. Other children at the home sometimes had at least something: a photograph, a letter, a toy left behind by a birth parent. Emma had nothing at all, only a frayed gray wool blanket the sisters said she'd been wrapped in when she was discovered. She grew up inside the orphanage's cold walls and learned to rely on herself while she was still very young, because there was no one else to lean on. Children came and went, adopted by kind families, but Emma never did. Maybe she was too quiet, too closed off. Or maybe it was simply that no one wanted a child with no origin story. When she turned 18, she left the home with a small suitcase and a few $100s saved from part-time jobs. She waited tables, washed dishes, cleaned hotel rooms, anything that could earn money to cover college tuition. For 6 straight years she studied and worked, and she graduated in early childhood education with an above-average degree and hands calloused from labor. No family came to her graduation. No one took a commemorative photo. She stood alone in a crowd of students, hugging their loved ones, and wondered if her life would ever be different. The employment agency sent her to the Thornton mansion on an autumn day, 3 years ago, when she had just turned 24. It was supposed to be a temporary job, only a few weeks filling in for the head nanny while she was on leave. Emma didn't expect much. She only needed enough money to pay next month's rent. But fate had other plans. Charlie Thornton was 2 at the time, and her mother had died only 6 months earlier in a devastating car accident. The little child cried without stopping, from morning to night, from night to morning, as if the pain of losing her mother had soaked into her bones, even though she was too young to understand what had happened. The previous nanny, a 55-year-old woman with more than 30 years of childcare experience, had given up after 2 months. She told Mr. Thornton she had never seen a child suffer that deeply, and she didn't have the ability to heal a wound like that. On the first day Emma arrived, Charlie was sitting on the living room floor and crying. It wasn't the ordinary demanding cry of a child. It was something broken and desperate, like a small lost soul calling for help. Emma didn't know what to do. She had no experience, no tricks, nothing but the instinct of someone who had once been a lonely child herself. She sat down on the floor a few steps away from Charlie and pulled a picture book from the nearest shelf. She began to read, not in the usual flat voice, but with a different voice for each character. A rumbling voice for the bear, a shrill voice for the mouse, a warm, deep voice for the sun. Charlie stopped crying. Her green eyes, wet with tears, looked at Emma first with curiosity, then with delight, then with something like trust. She crawled closer, and closer still, until she settled right beside Emma. And when the story ended, Charlie lifted her tiny arms, asking to be held. Emma gathered the little girl into her arms, felt the warmth of her body and the clean scent of baby wash, and something inside her changed forever. From that day on, the two of them became inseparable. Charlie refused to sleep unless Emma sang her to sleep, refused to eat unless Emma fed her, refused to go outside unless she could hold Emmy's hand. The temporary job became permanent, and the cold mansion slowly found laughter again. Then Emma began to notice that look. Alex Thornton, the powerful man the entire city of Charleston feared, often stood in the living room doorway late at night, silently watching Emma and Charlie as they watched cartoons. He didn't say anything. He only stood there in the shadows. But Emma could feel his eyes on her. She pretended she didn't know, kept her attention on the television screen or on Charlie's honey blonde hair. But her heart beat faster every time. She knew it was wrong. A nanny shouldn't feel anything beyond professionalism for her employer. But feelings never ask permission to exist. They grew inside her like a seed planted in darkness, quietly taking root no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. In recent months, that battle had become harder and harder. Every time Alex's hand brushed hers by accident when he handed Charlie to her, every time he smiled at her after a long, exhausting day, every time the 3 of them sat together like a real family, Emma had to remind herself she didn't belong here. She was only hired help, nothing more and nothing less. But maybe her heart had stopped listening to reason, and maybe that was why today's pain was so enormous. Everything had once been perfect, until this morning. Inside the mansion, the silence after Emma left carried a strange weight, as if the air itself had thickened, and breathing took more effort than usual. Down in the kitchen, Maggie O'Brien stood at the sink, her wrinkled hands submerged in hot, soapy water. She had been the Thornton family's housekeeper for more than 20 years. She'd watched Alex grow from a mischievous boy into the powerful man the entire city feared. She'd also watched him love Isabel, marry Isabel, lose Isabel, and nearly collapse completely after her death. Then she'd watched Emma arrive. She'd watched light seep back into this house. She'd watched Charlie laugh again. She'd watched Alex begin to live instead of merely exist. And this morning, she'd watched it all get destroyed in less than 5 minutes. The clatter of pots and pans against the stainless steel sink rang out like a symphony of protest. Maggie didn't say a word when Alex announced his decision. It wasn't her place to question him, to argue, to tell her employer he was making the biggest mistake of his life. But her eyes that had seen far too much in this house, said everything her mouth could not. Disappointment, heartbreak, and something that looked a little like contempt for a man she had once believed was smarter than this. Upstairs, on the second floor, in the study behind a tightly closed oak door, Alex Thornton sat motionless in front of his computer screen. Numbers and charts danced before his eyes, but he wasn't really seeing any of it. His mind kept circling back to the image of Emma walking out of his office that morning. Those warm brown eyes full of shock and hurt. She hadn't cried in front of him, hadn't begged, hadn't demanded an explanation. She had only nodded mechanically, said, "Yes, Mr. Thornton," and then turned her back and left. The way she called him Mr. Thornton instead of Alex, the way she did when no one else was around, felt like a knife pushed into his chest. He'd done the right thing. He told himself, over and over, like a prayer. He'd done the right thing. He'd done the right thing. He'd done the right thing. But if it was right, why did it feel like he'd just destroyed something precious with his own hands? It had started with a phone call that morning, when he'd just woken up and hadn't even had his coffee yet. Victoria Ashford, the woman he had almost married 8 years earlier, the woman who had reappeared in his life 4 months ago at a charity event in Savannah. She was more beautiful than he remembered, more polished, more alluring. She said she'd heard about Isabel, that she was sorry, that she was here if he needed a friend. Alex, exhausted under the weight of being a single father while running his underworld empire, had accepted the hand she offered without questioning the motive behind it. The meetings began infrequently. A dinner here, a lunch there. Victoria always said exactly what he wanted to hear, always acted interested in Charlie, even though the child was clearly not very excited by her presence. And this morning, her voice came through the phone with a carefully measured note of concern. "I don't want to interfere in your life, Alex, but I'm truly worried." Alex sat up in bed, frowning. "Worried about what?" "About your nanny." Victoria paused for a beat, theatrical. "The way she looks at you isn't normal, Alex. I noticed it last weekend when I came by. She looks at you like you're not her employer, but something more than that." Alex said nothing. "An employee shouldn't have that kind of attachment to her boss," Victoria went on. "I just think you should know. Who knows what her intentions are? Maybe she wants your money. Maybe she wants to be the next Mrs. Thornton. Women like that are very good at acting." Alex tried to push back. "Emma isn't like that. She's been here for 3 years and she's never done anything inappropriate." But Victoria didn't let it go. 3 years is long enough to build trust, isn't it? Long enough for you to let your guard down. I only want you to be careful. You can never be too careful, especially in your position. Those words planted a seed of doubt in Alex's mind. In his world, a mafia world, where betrayal could come from anyone, even the people closest to you, suspicion was a survival instinct. He had seen too many people betrayed by the ones they trusted most. He had watched his own father get killed by his best friend. He had learned the lesson that trust was a luxury a man like him couldn't afford. And once that seed of doubt had been planted, it grew at a brutal speed. He started to replay Emma's glances, the way she smiled when he came home, the way her pulse seemed to quicken whenever he stood too close. Things he had once accepted as ordinary, even comforting, suddenly felt suspicious through the lens Victoria had handed him. He had chosen to remove the risk instead of trusting what his own eyes had witnessed for 3 years. He had chosen to listen to a woman who had only returned to his life a few months ago instead of trusting the one who cared for his daughter every day. And now, alone in his dim study, Alex Thornton began to wonder whether he had just pushed away the best thing that had ever come into his life. Victoria Ashford arrived at the mansion that afternoon like a queen come to inspect her own realm. Her expensive red dress clung to her perfect figure. Her high heels tapped a steady rhythm against the marble floor. Her glossy brown hair was styled in careful curls, and her radiant smile had been practiced into flawless shape. She found Alex in the living room, where he sat with his second glass of whiskey in hand, his gaze far away as he stared out the window. "I heard you handled the problem," Victoria said in a voice too sweet to be sincere, resting her hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing, my love. Trust me." Alex didn't answer. He only took another swallow of whiskey and gave a weary nod. 8 years earlier, Victoria Ashford and Alexander Thornton had almost become husband and wife. The wedding invitations had been printed, the church had been reserved, the gown had been custom-fitted. Victoria had believed she was about to become Mrs. Thornton, the wife of the most powerful man in Charleston, mistress of an enormous fortune and a frightening underworld empire. Then Isabel appeared, an ordinary girl, with no family name, no money, nothing but vivid blue eyes and a smile that made Alex forget the rest of the world. He called off the engagement with Victoria just 2 weeks before the wedding, without a single apology large enough to soothe the humiliation she endured in front of high society. Victoria never forgot, and she never forgave. She waited, patient as a snake watching its prey. And when Isabel died, she knew her chance had finally come. After sitting with Alex for about an hour, offering hollow comforts and stroking his wounded ego, Victoria asked to use the restroom. But instead of going to the bathroom, she turned into an empty corridor near the staircase and took out her phone. Her voice changed completely the moment the person on the other end picked up, shifting from falsely sweet to cold and calculating. "Everything's going exactly the way it should," she told her friend, the only person who knew her real plan. "The little Nanny has disappeared. She won't dare come back, not after being thrown out like that." Victoria's tone brimmed with victory. Now all that's left is dealing with the annoying little one. She paused, listening to the reply, then let out a sharp, scornful laugh. "Oh, she won't be a problem for long. Once I marry Alex, I'll send her off to boarding school in Switzerland or somewhere far away. Alex will be heartbroken for a little while, but I'll convince him. Men are all the same. If you know how to do it, they'll listen. Without that little girl trailing around, everything will be so much easier. The money, the power, all of it will be mine. It should have been mine 8 years ago if that Isabel girl hadn't gotten in the way." Victoria had no idea that only a few steps away, behind the half-open door of the playroom, a pair of green eyes had gone wide with horror. Charlie stood there, clutching her teddy bear tight, her whole body trembling as she heard every word the woman said. "Emmy is the nuisance. I am the annoying little one. Boarding school far away." The 5-year-old didn't understand every meaning inside those words, but she understood enough to know this woman hated Emmy, hated her too, and was making plans to make both of them vanish from her father's life. Tears rolled down Charlie's cheeks as she backed away as quietly as she could, desperate not to make a sound. And then she ran to her room with a heart that felt broken in two. The next morning, Charlie woke with swollen eyes from crying all night. She sprang out of bed and ran to Emma's room the way she always did, but the door opened onto nothing but emptiness. The bed had been neatly made, the closet was bare, there was no familiar scent of Emma, no soft shawl Charlie loved to curl up in whenever she was being held. "Where's Emmy?" Charlie asked Maggie when the housekeeper came looking for her. Her voice trembled, her green eyes wide with worry. "Where's Emmy? Why is Emmy's room empty?" Maggie knelt down to Charlie's eye level, her heart squeezing tight as she forced herself to say the words. "Emmy's gone, sweetheart." She spoke very gently, fighting to keep her voice from shaking. "Emmy isn't here anymore." Charlie went still, as if she'd turned to stone. "Gone where? When is Emmy coming back?" Maggie didn't know how to answer. She could only shake her head and reach for the child, but Charlie flinched away, refusing her arms. No, Emmy will come back. Emmy promised she would never leave me. Emmy promised." She ran through the house, room to room, calling Emma's name without stopping. "Emmy, Emmy, where are you? Emmy, stop hiding. I already found you." But no answer came, no warm arms wrapped around her from behind the way they always did when they played hide and seek. That day, Charlie didn't eat breakfast. She sat in front of the plate of pancakes Maggie had made, her favorite, and never lifted a fork. By noon, she still hadn't eaten. By evening, she took only a few sips of milk and pushed the cup away. Alex tried to soothe her, tried to talk, but Charlie looked at her father with an unfamiliar gaze that hurt to see, then turned away without saying a word. On the second day, everything was worse. Charlie didn't play with any toys, didn't watch cartoons, didn't read books. She only sat by the living room window, where she could see the front gate of the mansion, and waited. She waited for Rob's black car to bring Emmy back. She waited for the familiar figure of her nanny to step through the iron gate. She waited for a miracle she was certain would happen. Maggie tried to come close with cookies and warm milk, but Charlie waved her off. "I don't want it. I only want Emmy." Rob tried to tell jokes the way he always did, but the little girl didn't even look at him. The entire mansion sank into a heavy, suffocating atmosphere, as if the walls themselves were mourning Emma's departure. That night, Charlie's sobbing echoed down the hall. Alex ran to his daughter's room and found her curled on the bed, clutching the teddy bear Emma had given her for her birthday last year. "Emmy! Emmy!" she cried through ragged hiccups. "I want Emmy. I want Emmy to come back." Alex sat beside her and tried to pull her into his arms. "Daddy's here, Charlie. Daddy's here with you," but Charlie shoved him away, her eyes red and swollen as she stared at him with a kind of hurt that tore him apart. "Why did Emmy leave me? Did I do something wrong? Why didn't Emmy say goodbye?" Alex couldn't answer. The words stuck in his throat as he watched his little girl break into pieces. Late that night, Charlie's skin began to burn with heat. Maggie took her temperature and shook her head, worried. "She has a fever. A fever from too much crying, from not eating or drinking, from a pain too large for a small heart." On the third day, Victoria came to visit with a perfectly performed look of concern. "I heard Charlie isn't well," she said to Alex in a voice thick with care. "Let me go up and see how she is." She stepped into Charlie's room and put on the sweetest smile she could manage. "Hello, sweetheart. Aunt Victoria came to see you. Do you want me to tell you a story?" Charlie's reaction stunned both Victoria and Alex, who was standing just outside the door. The child bolted upright, her eyes wide with fear and fury. "Go away! I don't want you!" Charlie screamed, her voice hoarse from crying and fever. "Go away! You're bad. You're bad." Victoria stumbled back, her face flickering for a single second before she quickly recovered her false sadness. She turned to Alex and spoke in a carefully calculated, choking voice. "She's very upset. The fever must be making her say things. I'll wait downstairs, so you can calm her first." But as Victoria turned and walked into the hall, her eyes flashed with a cold spark of anger. "This little brat will pay." Alex stood there, staring at his daughter, the small child trembling on the bed, her eyes full of tears and genuine fear when she looked at Victoria. For the first time since he'd made the decision to fire Emma, a real shard of doubt began to form in his mind. Charlie had never reacted like that to anyone. She was gentle, sweet, always polite with adults. So why was she so afraid of Victoria? And why did she hate her so much? And why did he suddenly feel he'd missed something important? On the third night, Charlie's fever climbed higher. Alex sat beside his daughter's bed from 9 o'clock that evening, watching the small child curled beneath a thin blanket. Her cheeks flushed crimson, her lips cracked and dry, her eyes swollen from too many tears. In her arms was an old brown teddy bear, the gift Emma had given her on her birthday last year, the only thing left that still connected Charlie to the nanny who had gone away. She held it as if it were the only lifeline in a sea of desperation. Alex placed his hand on Charlie's forehead, felt the heat bloom against his palm, and his heart tightened. His little girl, the child he loved more than anything in the world, was enduring a pain he had caused with his own hands. He bent down and smoothed her tangled honey-blonde hair. "Sweetheart," he whispered, his voice rough from worry and too little sleep. "Tell Daddy. Why are you so sad?" Charlie opened her eyes, her wet green gaze fixed on him. There was no longer the easy innocence of a 5-year-old in that look. In its place lived a deep sorrow, and something that resembled disappointment. "You sent Emmy away," she said, her voice weak but clear. "Emmy didn't do anything wrong, Daddy." Alex went rigid. He meant to say something, to explain, to defend what he had done, but Charlie kept going. "I know why you sent Emmy away. I know everything, Daddy." The words from a 5-year-old hit Alex like lightning. "What do you know?" he asked, his voice trembling despite himself. "What do you know about this, Charlie?" Charlie sat up slowly, still clutching the teddy bear tight. "I heard Victoria on the phone," she began, looking straight into her father's eyes with a seriousness that didn't belong to her age. "The day she came, I was playing in the room near the stairs. I heard it all." Alex felt the air in the room thicken, squeezing his chest. "Victoria said Emmy is a nuisance," Charlie went on, her voice starting to shake as she remembered those cruel words. "She said I'm an annoying little one. She said once she marries you, she'll send me away to boarding school far away. She said without me trailing around, everything would be easier." Every word Charlie spoke was a knife driving through Alex's heart. He sat there, frozen, unable to believe what he was hearing. "Victoria hates me, Daddy." Tears began to slide down Charlie's cheeks. "She hates Emmy. She only pretends to be good to you. She wanted to get Emmy out. She wanted to get me out too, so she could have you and the money and everything." I heard her say it. Alex felt the ground give way beneath him. The pieces fell into place, forming a picture completely different from the one he'd believed. Victoria's call that morning, her warnings about the way Emma looked at him, her false concern about the nanny's intentions. It had all been a carefully staged performance. He had been played. He, Alexander Thornton, the powerful mafia boss the entire city of Charleston feared, had been led around like a fool by an ambitious woman. He had trusted Victoria's words instead of what his own eyes had witnessed for 3 years. He had fired Emma, the woman who had loved his daughter like her own, who had brought light back into this house, who had made him believe life after Isabel could still be good. "And Emmy never says bad things about anyone," Charlie continued, her voice breaking. "Emmy loves me for real. Emmy sings me to sleep every night. Emmy made my birthday cake. Emmy held me when I cried because I missed Mommy. Emmy never said I'm a nuisance. Emmy said I'm the best thing in the world. Why did you believe Victoria and not believe Emmy, Daddy?" That question pierced the armor Alex had built over so many years. He, the man who hadn't cried in front of anyone since Isabel's funeral, felt tears spill out before he could stop them. He pulled Charlie into his arms and held her tight, feeling her small body burning with fever and shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick and broken. "I'm sorry, Charlie. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. Will you bring Emmy back?" Charlie asked, lifting her face to him, her eyes full of hope even through the tears. Promise me, Daddy." Alex held her closer and pressed a kiss to her burning forehead. "I promise," he said, his voice firm even as tears kept falling. "I'll bring Emmy back. I'll fix this mistake. I promise you." That night, when Charlie finally drifted into sleep after so many sleepless nights, Alex still sat beside her bed, watching her angelic face slowly ease into peace. In his mind, the plan was already clear. First, Victoria would pay for what she'd done, and then, even if he had to turn the entire city of Charleston upside down, he would find Emma and bring her back to where she belonged. The next morning, Victoria Ashford walked into the Thornton mansion with the confidence of a victor. She wore an elegant cream dress, her hair styled to perfection, a radiant smile on her lips as if she were the true mistress of this house. She found Alex standing in the living room with his back to the door, staring out at the garden through the tall window. "Good morning, my love," Victoria said in her familiar sweet voice as she moved closer and reached to lay a hand on his shoulder. "How is Charlie? Has her fever gone down? I worried about her all night." Alex didn't turn around. He stood as still as stone, his shoulders rigid beneath his black shirt. When he spoke, his voice was so cold it could have frozen the room. "I know everything, Victoria." Victoria stopped, her hand suspended in midair. "Know what?" she asked, still trying to hold on to innocence. "What are you talking about?" Alex turned, and Victoria instinctively took a step back when she saw his eyes. There was no warmth left in them, none of the fatigue or weakness she had exploited. There was only the ruthless cold of a mafia boss looking at an enemy. "I know about your phone call," Alex said, each word dropping heavy as a death sentence. "I know you called the nanny a nuisance. I know you called my daughter an annoying little one. I know you planned to send Charlie to boarding school after you married me. You thought I wouldn't know, but Charlie heard everything." Victoria's face went pale for a heartbeat before she forced herself back into control. "My love," she tried to smile, her voice trembling slightly. "She's only 5. She doesn't understand anything. She must have heard wrong, or imagined it. You know children make things up. Don't perform for me anymore." Alex cut in, his voice sharp as a blade. "I've heard enough of your lies. That call that morning, your warnings about Emma, it was all part of your plan. You wanted Emma out of here so no one would stand in your way, but you miscalculated." Victoria realized her innocent act was useless now. Her expression shifted slowly, the sweetness draining away, replaced by something real and bitter. "She's just a nanny," Victoria shouted, the last mask falling completely. "An orphan girl with no family and no one of her own. You chose her over me? I'm Victoria Ashford. I come from a respected family. I've waited for you for 8 years. You owe me, Alex. You've owed me since the day you called off our engagement to chase that Isabel." Alex stepped toward her, and with each step Victoria took one back until her spine met the wall. "I don't owe you anything," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And you made a very big mistake when you touched my daughter. Now you're going to leave this house, and you will never appear in front of me or Charlie again. Are you threatening me?" Victoria tried to steady herself, but her voice shook. "Have you forgotten what I know about your work? About the night shipments? About the secret meetings? I can go to the police right now." Alex laughed, a cold sound that never reached his eyes. "Do you know why the Charleston police never touch me?" he asked, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "You think you know who I am, but you've only seen the surface of the iceberg, Victoria. Don't ever be foolish enough to test me. Now get out." Victoria stood there, her face drained of color, her lips moving without sound. Her eyes filled with fear as she finally understood she had been playing with fire and had been badly burned. Maggie appeared in the living room doorway as if she'd been waiting there all along. "I'll see you out," she said to Victoria in a flat voice, with not a shred of respect. "And don't forget anything here, because there won't be a next time to come back for it." Victoria turned and hurried out of the room, her posture stripped of the arrogance she'd walked in with. The sharp click of her heels echoed across the stone floor, fading farther and farther away until the front door slammed shut behind her. Maggie turned back to Alex, her eyes lit with both approval and worry. "What are you waiting for?" she asked, her voice softening. "Go find her, before it's too late." Alex drove through Charleston's streets as fast as he could without breaking the law. He didn't want to be stopped by the police. Not now. Not when every second that passed could be the growing distance between him and Emma. The car turned into a neighborhood he'd never set foot in, where old houses stood shoulder to shoulder, paint peeling from their walls and roof tiles faded by time. Nothing like the gated elegance where he lived. This was the world of ordinary working people, of modest dreams and simple lives. This was where Emma returned after her days in his mansion, and he'd never cared enough to notice until now. He stopped in front of a 2-story house with a crooked wooden fence and a small yard choked with weeds. According to the address in the employee file he'd found before leaving home, this was where Emma rented a room. His heart pounded in his chest as he climbed the creaking wooden steps and knocked. He didn't know what he would say if he saw her. "I'm sorry?" Would an apology be enough for what he'd done? Would she forgive him? Would she agree to come back? The door opened, but it wasn't Emma standing there. It was an elderly woman of around 70, with snow-white hair and curious eyes behind reading glasses. "Who are you looking for?" she asked, her voice a little raspy. "I'm looking for Emma Sullivan," Alex said, trying to keep his tone steady even though his heart was beating like a drum. "She rented a room here, didn't she?" "Miss Sullivan?" The old woman lifted her brows. "She checked out this morning." The answer hit Alex like a bucket of ice water. "Checked out?" he repeated, unable to believe what he'd heard. "Where did she go?" The landlady shrugged. "I don't know. She didn't say. She just paid the rent, thanked me for letting her stay all these years, and left. Poor girl. She looked so sad. Her eyes were swollen like she'd been crying. I asked if she was all right, but she only smiled and said she'd be fine." Alex stood there, frozen. Emma was gone. She wasn't here anymore, and he didn't know where she'd gone. "Did she mention anywhere at all?" he asked, urgent now. "Any city? Any relatives?" The old woman shook her head. "The girl doesn't have family. She told me she grew up in an orphanage. No mother, no father, no brothers or sisters. I'm the closest thing to family she's had these past few years, and even that is only a landlord and a tenant. Poor girl." Alex turned and walked away without even managing a thank you, his mind spinning. Emma had no family, no hometown, no place to return to. She could go anywhere in this vast country, and he would never find her. The thought sent real panic through him, a feeling Alexander Thornton rarely experienced. He got into the car, pulled out his phone, and called Marcus, his most trusted right hand in his underworld empire. Marcus picked up on the second ring. "Boss, what is it?" "Find a woman," Alex said, his voice cold and decisive, the same tone he used when giving orders in private meetings. "Emma Sullivan, 27, brown hair, brown eyes, about 5'5". She left her old address this morning. Check every airport, every bus station, every train station in the city. Check the routes out of Charleston, too. Find her. Immediately," Marcus replied without hesitation. "I'll mobilize the men." Alex's network stretched across Charleston and the surrounding areas. He had people in the police, in the airport, in transportation companies. If Emma was still in the city or had only just left, his people would find her. He had to believe that. The hours that followed were torture for Alex. He drove around the city without purpose, stopped by places he knew Emma liked. Waterfront Park, the ice cream shop near the pier, the public library where she often took Charlie to read. But there was no sign of her anywhere. The phone rang while he was parked by the curb, staring blankly at the flow of people. "Boss," Marcus said, his voice tight. "We found her. She's at the Central bus station. She just bought a ticket to Atlanta. The bus leaves in 30 minutes. Alex didn't wait for Marcus to finish. He hit the gas and the car shot forward like a bullet through Charleston's streets. He ran a yellow light, cut between lanes, laid on the horn when someone crawled too slowly in front of him. In his head, only one thought repeated, over and over, like a desperate prayer. "Don't go. Please don't go. Emma, don't go. Give me a chance. Just one chance. 30 minutes. He had 30 minutes to reach the station, find Emma in the crowd, and convince her he deserved forgiveness. 30 minutes to save everything he'd been foolish enough to destroy. Never in his life had Alexander Thornton driven this fast. Charleston's Central bus station at noon was a knot of chaos. Car horns blaring, people calling to one another, loudspeakers announcing departures, engines roaring and coughing smoke. Alex pulled in right at the entrance and didn't care about the no parking sign or the irritated look from the security guard. He surged inside, his eyes sweeping the crowd like an eagle on the hunt. Dozens of buses sat in the lot, each one marked with a different destination. Atlanta, Savannah, Jacksonville, Columbia. People flowed nonstop, dragging luggage, clutching children, hurrying toward their gates. He searched for a familiar figure in the moving mass. Glossy brown hair, a slender frame, but all he saw were strangers. His heart hammered harder and harder, each second that slipped away, cutting into the little hope he had left. Then he saw her. Emma stood at Gate 7, where the bus to Atlanta was waiting for passengers to board. She held a small, dark blue suitcase, the same one he'd seen in her room at the mansion. The back of her white blouse was wrinkled as if she'd worn it for days. Her brown hair pulled into a loose, hurried ponytail, and even from this distance, he could see her shoulders looked narrower, as if she hadn't eaten properly in days. She was stepping onto the first stair of the bus when he shouted, "Emma, wait." His voice rang across the noise, loud enough to make people turn. And Emma turned too. She stood there on the bus step, one hand gripping the rail, the other holding her suitcase, her brown eyes wide with shock as she stared at the man standing less than 10 steps away. Her face was paler than he remembered, her eyes swollen with bruised shadows underneath, as if she'd cried too much and slept too little for too many nights. And even like that, she was still beautiful enough to hurt. Slowly, she stepped back down from the bus and set the suitcase on the ground, but she didn't come closer. The space between them felt like a chasm that couldn't be crossed. "What are you doing here?" Emma asked, her voice cold and distant, as if they had never known each other. She called him Sir, not Alex the way she had when they were alone, and it struck his chest harder than any bullet. "Please," Alex said, taking a step toward her, then stopping when she backed away. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" Emma's voice rose, all the feelings she had held down for days spilling out at once. "Explain how you fired me without a reason. Explain how you looked straight through me like I was air when I stood in your study that morning. Explain how you said my services were no longer needed, as if I were an object you could throw away whenever you felt like it." Emma paused to breathe, her eyes shining with tears that didn't fall. 3 years, Mr. Thornton. 3 years I took care of Charlie. 3 years I sang her to sleep every night, wiped her tears when she cried for her mother, taught her her first letters, stayed with her through every fever and every nightmare. 3 years I loved her like my own child. And you threw me out like trash. No explanation. No chance to defend myself. You couldn't even look me in the eye when you fired me. So what else is there for you to explain to me?" Alex stood there and took her words like lashes against skin. He deserved this. He deserved her anger, the hurt in her voice, the disappointment in the way she looked at him. "I know," he said, his voice rough. "I was wrong. I was completely wrong. There's no excuse for what I did. But you need to know the truth. Victoria manipulated me." Emma stilled, her brown eyes narrowing with doubt. "Victoria? She called me that morning," Alex went on, knowing he didn't have much time before the bus left. "She said the way you looked at me wasn't normal, that you might have bad intentions. I was stupid enough to believe her, instead of believing what my own eyes had seen for 3 years. I pushed you away because of a lie. And Charlie," he saw the shift in Emma's eyes when he said his daughter's name. Charlie heard Victoria on the phone with her friend. She heard Victoria call you a nuisance, call her an annoying little one. She heard Victoria say she'd send her away to boarding school after she married me. Charlie told me everything. And since you left, she hasn't eaten, she hasn't slept, she only sits and cries and calls your name. She's had a fever for 3 days. Emma, 3 days she's called for you without stopping. Emmy, Emmy, she keeps calling, delirious. Alex's voice broke. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I threw you out. I'm sorry for all the pain I caused you and Charlie. But please, don't go. Don't leave Charlie. She needs you. And I need you too. The bus horn blared, warning there were 5 minutes left before departure. But neither Alex nor Emma moved. They stood facing each other in the rush of people, as if time itself had stopped. Emma looked at him, her brown eyes torn between hurt and something else she refused to name. So it was all because of Victoria, she said, her voice bitter. One phone call, a few words, and you were ready to throw everything away. 3 years beside you and Charlie meant nothing compared to what that woman said. Alex drew a slow breath, knowing this was the moment he had to be completely honest, with no walls left to hide behind. In my world, he began, his voice low and deliberate, emotion is weakness. If you love someone, they'll use that person against you. If you trust someone, they'll use that trust to stab you in the back. I watched my father get killed by his closest friend. I've seen too many people fall because they dared to love, dared to believe. He paused, his eyes never leaving Emma. So I learned to doubt everyone. That's how I survived in that world. That's why I'm still standing here today, while so many others are buried in the ground. I built a wall around myself. I let no one in. I never let anyone close enough to hurt me. But you, his voice softened, and something filled his eyes that Emma had never seen in this powerful man. You made me want that weakness. I watched you with Charlie, the way you held her, the way you laughed with her, the way you turned that cold house into something that felt like home. And I saw family. For the first time since Isabel died, I wanted to believe in something again, to belong to something, to love without fear. And because I was afraid of that feeling, afraid of the softness you brought into my life, when Victoria planted doubt in my mind, I grabbed it like an excuse to push you away before you could get any closer. I was a coward, Emma. I was afraid of you more than I've ever been afraid of any enemy. Emma stood in silence, taking in every word. Her heart was splitting between the desire to believe him and the fear of being hurt again. How can I trust you? She finally said, her voice shaking slightly. You hurt me once. You can do it again. What will it be next time? Another woman says something and you throw me away again? Another baseless suspicion and I'm packing my things and leaving? I don't know if I can survive another time. You have every right to doubt me, Alex said, his voice firm. I don't deserve your trust. I know that. After what I did, if you step onto that bus and never come back, I won't blame you. But I'm asking you for one chance. Just one chance to prove I can change, that I can be a man worthy of your trust. Not with words, but with actions. Every day, little by little, I'll show you I'm not the coward who pushed you away anymore. The bus horn sounded again, this time the final warning. The driver looked toward Emma with impatient irritation. Emma glanced back at the bus, then at Alex, then back at the bus. She was standing at the crossroads of her life, and the choice she made in this moment would change everything. If I come back, she said slowly, each word weighed with care. I need time to think about everything that happened. I can't pretend nothing happened. I can't go back to the way things were before. Alex nodded, hardly daring to breathe, afraid to shatter this fragile moment. And I want to be clear about one thing, Emma continued, her voice harder now. I'm coming back for Charlie, not for you. She's suffering and I can't abandon her. That's all. Don't expect anything more from me. Alex looked at her, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. Only for Charlie? He asked softly. Emma didn't answer. She only stood there, looking at him with eyes that held 1,000 nameless emotions. And in that silence, they both knew the truth. Not only for Charlie. Never only for Charlie. The bus doors closed and the bus slowly rolled out of the station without Emma on it. She bent to pick up her suitcase and walked past Alex toward the exit. He stood there for a heartbeat, unable to believe what had just happened, then hurried after her. This time, he wouldn't let her walk away. The black car rolled through Charleston's familiar streets in the golden light of sunset. Emma sat in the back seat, staring out the window without truly seeing anything, her mind still spinning from everything that had happened in the past few hours. This morning, she had been ready to leave the city forever, ready to begin a new life somewhere no one knew her, where no memories of Charlie or Alex could haunt her. And yet now, she was on her way back to the very mansion she had believed she would never step into again. The late afternoon sun gilded the white colonial walls as the car stopped at the iron gate. The same sunlight as the day she left. The same walls, the same gravel path leading up to the main hall. And yet everything was completely different. That day, she had walked away with a shattered heart and eyes wet with tears. Today, she returned carrying a fragile thread of hope and a promise of a second chance. Alex stepped out first and opened the door for her. Emma got out and drew a deep breath of the familiar magnolia scent drifting on the evening air. She hadn't taken another step when the front doors of the mansion swung wide. Maggie stood there with flowers still on her apron, her aged eyes reddened and brimming with tears. "Thank God," she whispered, her voice thick. "Thank God. You're back. You're back." Rob stood just behind Maggie, and for the first time in the 3 years Emma had worked here, she saw the quiet man smile for real. Not his usual polite nod, but a warm smile of relief and genuine joy. "You're back," he said, his voice low and steady. "That's good." But before Emma could say anything to Maggie or Rob, a scream tore through the stillness of the evening. "Emmy!" Charlie burst out from behind Maggie, her little legs running so fast she nearly tripped on the stone steps. Her blonde hair flew in the wind, her green eyes wide with a joy she could hardly believe, and on her small face was the brightest smile Emma had ever seen. "Emmy's back. Emmy's back." Emma dropped to her knees just in time for Charlie to crash into her arms. Tiny arms locked around Emma's neck as if she would disappear if Charlie let go, the small body trembling as she cried and laughed at once. Emma held her back, gripping the child she loved like her own, and tears poured down her face before she could stop them. 3 days apart, but it felt like 3 years. 3 days without Charlie's laughter, without holding her, without singing her to sleep. 3 days Emma had thought would become forever, and now the child was in her arms again, real and warm. "Emmy," Charlie said through sobs, her face pressed to Emma's shoulder, tears soaking Emma's blouse. "Emmy came back. Emmy won't go again. Okay. Promise me, Emmy. Promise me you'll never leave me again." "I promise," Emma whispered, her voice breaking. "I promise, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here with you. You believe me. All right." They stayed like that on the gravel path, holding each other, no one saying another word. Alex stood a few steps away, watching with wet eyes. Maggie wiped her tears with the corner of her apron, and Rob turned his head and cleared his throat as if something had caught there. It wasn't until Maggie spoke softly, saying she had dinner ready and everyone should come inside before it got fully dark, that Charlie finally loosened her grip. Even then, she kept hold of Emma's hand, refusing to let go for even a second. Dinner that night was the warmest meal the mansion had witnessed in 3 years. The 4 of them sat around the kitchen table, instead of the formal dining room as usual. Alex, Emma, Charlie, and Maggie. There was no distance, no ceremony, only small stories, soft laughter, and eyes full of gratitude. Charlie sat, pressed close to Emma, refusing to eat unless Emma fed her, refusing to drink unless Emma lifted the cup to her lips. She told Emma about the days she'd been gone, about how much she'd cried, about calling Emmy's name every night, about the teddy bear Emma had given her, held tight and never put down. Emma listened, smoothed Charlie's hair, and inside her something began to knit itself back together. After dinner, Emma took Charlie upstairs the way she always had. Charlie changed into pajamas, brushed her teeth, then climbed into bed with the teddy bear in her arms. "Lie down, little princess," Emma said gently, pulling the blanket up over her. "It's bedtime now. Will Emmy sing for me?" Charlie asked. Like always, sweetheart." Emma sat on the edge of the bed, stroked Charlie's golden hair, and began to sing the lullaby she had sung thousands of times over the past 3 years. Her voice was soft and steady, carrying all the love she held for this child. Charlie held Emma's hand, her green eyes slowly closing, and on her lips was the most peaceful smile she'd worn since the day Emma left. By the time the song ended, Charlie was asleep. Emma stayed a few more minutes, watching the angel face in slumber, and she promised herself she would never let the child endure that kind of pain again. No matter what happened between her and Alex, no matter what the future held, she would always be here for Charlie. Emma closed Charlie's bedroom door gently and stood still in the hallway for a long moment. The child's steady breathing drifted through the narrow crack, and Emma smiled with relief. Tonight, Charlie would sleep well. She went down the stairs, passed through the silent living room, and stepped out onto the back porch of the mansion. This was her favorite place in the house, where she could see the Cooper River winding under moonlight and hear the wind moving through the branches of ancient oak trees. Tonight the moon was full and bright, laying a shimmering silver skin across the still water. Emma leaned against the wooden railing and drew a deep breath of Charleston night air, cool and clean. Soft footsteps sounded behind her, and she knew it was Alex without needing to turn around. He came to stand beside her, keeping just enough distance to not be too close and not too far, and together they looked out at the river in silence. It wasn't an awkward silence or a tense one like before, but the kind of quiet that feels easy, the kind two people share when they don't need words to fill the space. "Isabel liked standing out here too," Alex said after a long while, his voice low and gentle. "On moonlit nights like this, she used to come out and sit for hours. She said the river helped her think." Emma didn't speak. She only listened. It was the first time Alex had mentioned his late wife in front of her, without it being about work or about Charlie. "She would have liked you," Alex went on, his eyes still fixed on the distance. "She always told me I needed someone to pull me out of the dark, someone who wasn't afraid of my world but wouldn't let it swallow her either. She worried that after she was gone, I'd lock my heart away forever. Looks like she was right." He turned to look at Emma. "Until you showed up." Emma felt her heart beat faster, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not anything special. I'm just an orphan girl with nothing but a college degree and hands willing to work. Tell me about your childhood," Alex said softly. "I realize I don't know much about your past, beyond what was in your employee file." Emma hesitated for a moment. Then she began. "I grew up in an orphanage. No father, no mother, no brothers or sisters, no one I could call family. I lived there for 18 years, watching other children get adopted while I stayed behind. I learned not to expect anything from anyone, not to lean on anyone, because in the end, everyone leaves." She paused, her gaze drifting far away. "But being here with Charlie," she continued, her voice softening, "that was the first time in my life I knew what it felt like to belong somewhere. The first time I had someone waiting for me every morning, needing me every night, loving me without asking anything in return. She gave me something I'd never had in 27 years. A family, even if it was only a borrowed one." Alex didn't speak, but his hand moved slowly along the railing until it touched Emma's. He took her small hand in his, gentle but steady. Emma felt the warmth of his palm spread through her, and she didn't pull away. She let her hand remain there in his, a silent acceptance. "Thank you for giving me a second chance," Alex said, his voice deep and sincere. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'll try every day to become worthy of it." Emma turned to look at him. Moonlight caught in her brown eyes. "Don't waste it," she said, and in those 4 short words lived both a warning and a promise. Alex nodded and gave her hand a gentle squeeze. They stood there beneath Charleston's moon, watching the Cooper River glitter, and for the first time since they'd known each other, they were no longer employer and employee, just two people who had been hurt, trying to find their way back to each other. The days that followed passed like a dream Emma didn't dare believe was real. Alex Thornton, the powerful mafia boss the entire city of Charleston feared, was changing right in front of her, day by day. The man who used to come home at 10 o'clock at night, when Charlie was already fast asleep, now appeared at the front door at 6 o'clock in the evening, in time to have dinner with his daughter and listen to her chatter about everything she had done that day. The man who once knew only numbers and secret meetings now spent whole afternoons playing hide-and-seek with Charlie in the garden, letting her climb onto his back and pretend he was a horse, and sitting for hours listening to her read picture books, even though her words were still lisped and imperfect. He even showed up in the kitchen every morning, learning how to make pancakes from Maggie, even when his first batches came out charred black and Maggie had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. But he didn't give up, and by the 5th day his pancakes were round and golden, like they'd been made by a real cook. Emma watched all of it in silence, her heart softening even as her mind kept warning her to be careful. She'd been hurt once, and the wound still hadn't fully healed. But with each passing day, with each small gesture from Alex, with each look he gave her, the wall she had built began to wobble a little more. Then that morning came. Emma was deep asleep in her room when a small but energetic weight bounced onto the bed, jolting her awake. "Wake up, Emmy, wake up," Charlie shouted right by her ear, tiny hands shaking her shoulders again and again. "Today is important." Emma blinked, staring at Charlie's bright face hovering over her. The child's blonde hair was still wild from sleep, but her green eyes were blazing as if 1,000 stars lived inside them. "Important for what, sweetheart?" Emma asked, her voice rough with sleep. What day is it? Charlie smiled in that secretive way children do when they're guarding something big. I can't say. It's a secret. But Emmy has to get up. Right now. Hurry, Emmy. She grabbed Emma's hand and pulled her upright with all the strength a 5-year-old could summon. Emma barely had time to react before the bedroom door opened, and Alex walked in carrying a large wooden tray. On it sat a tall stack of pancakes, a bowl of fresh fruit in bright colors, and 2 steaming cups of coffee. Good morning, Alex said, the smile on his mouth making him look 10 years younger. This morning I'm serving. Emma stared at him, then at Charlie, then back at him, unable to believe her eyes. The most powerful mafia boss in Charleston was standing in her room with a breakfast tray, wearing a simple t-shirt and khakis like the most ordinary father in the world. It was my idea, Charlie declared proudly, climbing onto the bed beside Emma. I told Daddy to make you breakfast, Emmy. Daddy did good. The pancakes aren't burnt anymore. Alex set the tray down in the middle of the bed and sat on the other side, and just like that, the 3 of them ate breakfast together on Emma's bed. Charlie sat between them, chewing pancakes while talking non-stop about 100 different things. Then suddenly she went quiet, her face turning serious in a way that didn't fit a child her age. Emmy, she said, her voice small but clear. I know Mommy Isabel is in heaven now. Mommy isn't coming back. Emma and Alex both went still, staring at her in surprise. This was the first time Charlie had brought up her birth mother like this on her own. But Maggie told me a heart is big enough to love lots of people, Charlie went on, her clear green eyes fixed on Emma. So I love Mommy Isabel in the sky. And I love Emmy too, both, at the same time. Is that okay, Emmy? Tears rose in Emma's eyes before she could stop them. She pulled Charlie into her arms, held her tight, and cried out loud. Of course it's okay, sweetheart, she said through sobs. Of course it is. You can love both. Your heart is big enough to love the whole world. Alex sat there, his own eyes wet as he watched. His little girl, the child he had once feared would never survive the pain of losing her mother, was opening herself to new love without letting go of the old. She had grown. She had matured in a way he had never expected. Charlie suddenly pulled away from Emma's embrace and turned to her father with a look of fierce determination. Now it's your turn, she yelled, making both Alex and Emma jump. You promised me last night that this morning you would say it. Say it, Daddy. Alex cleared his throat, his face suddenly flushing like a teenage boy caught admitting he liked someone. He glanced at Emma with a rare shyness for a mafia boss, then drew a deep breath as if he were preparing for the most important battle of his life. Alex looked at Emma, and in his deep blue eyes was a sincerity she had never seen in all their 3 years together. He drew a long breath, and when he spoke his voice trembled slightly, as if these words had been locked inside him for too long and were finally being set free. Emma, he began, saying her name with tenderness. I know I hurt you. I know I was a coward when I pushed you away because I was afraid of my own feelings. I know I was unfair when I believed someone else instead of believing what my own eyes had seen for 3 years. And I know you have every right not to trust me, to refuse me, to stand up and walk away right now. Emma sat still, her heart pounding so hard she thought the whole room might hear it. She didn't speak. She only watched him and waited. But these past days have shown me something I can't deny anymore. Alex continued, his gaze locked on hers. I love you, Emma. I love you not because you're a good nanny to Charlie, not because you've been by her side for 3 years, not for any practical reason at all. I love you because you're you. I love the way you take care of Charlie, the way you sing her to sleep every night, the way you stay patient through every tantrum and every endless why. I love the way you turned this cold house into a real home, the way you brought laughter back into rooms that had been silent for too long after Isabel died. I love the way you make me want to be a better man, a better father, a better human being. Before I met you, I thought my life would stay buried in the darkness of the underworld and the grief of losing my wife. But you brought light in, even though I didn't understand it until I almost lost you forever. Alex reached for Emma's hand and held it, squeezing gently as if he were afraid she might vanish. I want to build a family with you, not the kind of family where you're hired help and I'm the boss. A real family, where you belong, where you're loved and cherished the way you deserve to be. I want to do this the right way, with sincerity and respect. I want to love you for the rest of my life, if you'll allow me. Emma looked around the room, emotion rising until it tightened her throat. Charlie sat beside her, small hands clasped so hard her knuckles were white, her green eyes wide with anxious hope as she waited for Emma's answer. In the doorway, Somehow there, without Emma noticing when she'd arrived, Maggie was wiping tears with the corner of her apron, her shoulders trembling with feeling. And in front of Emma was Alex, the man who had once hurt her down to the bone, but who now stood with his heart completely open. No walls left, no masks, only honesty, waiting to be accepted or rejected. Emma thought about her 27 years. 27 years of loneliness, no family, no one to call her own. She thought about the small dream she had once carried as a child in the orphanage, a dream of a warm home, of family dinners, of a place she belonged. And now that dream was within reach, if she could find the courage to take it. Yes. The word slipped from her lips like a breath, soft but certain. Yes, she said again, clearer this time, her eyes steady on Alex's. I do. All of it. Alex's face lit up as if the sun had finally risen after a long storm. He lifted his hands to Emma's face, his thumb brushing away the tears sliding down her cheek, and then he bent to kiss her. Their first kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise for a future neither of them had dared to imagine before. It tasted of morning coffee and fresh pancakes, of happy tears and years of waiting, of family and hope. Yay. Charlie's shout ripped through the romantic moment, but no one minded. She bounced on the bed, clapping over and over, her face brighter than Emma had ever seen it. Daddy and Emmy kissed, like in a movie. So Emmy is really my mom now, Daddy. Emma and Alex pulled apart, both of them laughing at the child's excitement. Charlie turned to Emma, her eyes shining with hope. Can I call you Mom? Can I? Emmy. Please. Please. I'm begging. I promise I'll be good. I'll eat all my vegetables. I won't ask to stay up late anymore. Let me call you Mom. Emma glanced at Alex as if asking permission. He smiled and nodded, his own eyes red with emotion. It's your choice. I'll support whatever you decide. Emma looked back at Charlie, the child she had loved like her own from the very first moment, the child who had shown her what it meant to be needed, to be loved, to belong. Yes, sweetheart, she said, her voice breaking. If you want to, you can call me Mom. Mom. Charlie screamed and threw herself into Emma's arms, wrapping her arms around Emma's neck as if afraid she would vanish. Mom. My mom. I have a mom now. I really have a mom. Emma held Charlie, tears streaming down her face. For 27 years, no one had ever called her mom. She had never imagined she would hear that sacred word spoken to her. And now, from the mouth of a 5-year-old with golden hair and green eyes, it was sweeter than any music she had ever heard. Hello, my daughter, Emma whispered, holding Charlie tight. Hello, my Charlie. Alex wrapped his arms around both of them, forming a perfect circle. In the doorway, Maggie was crying openly now, pressing her apron to her face and sobbing out loud. And in that Charleston morning flooded with sunlight, in a small room with a half-finished breakfast tray, a new family was born. Not by blood, but by love. Not by obligation, but by choice. A family of hearts that had been wounded, now finding healing in one another. The three of them stayed wrapped around one another on the rumpled bed beside the breakfast tray gone cold, none of them wanting to be the first to let go. Charleston's morning sunlight streamed through the open window, filling the room with a warm, golden glow like honey. There was no longer the darkness of doubt, no longer the pain of separation, no longer the wall of fear. There were only 3 people, 3 hearts, and a love large enough to hold it all. Suddenly, Charlie lifted her head, her green eyes widening as she looked toward the window. Look, she whispered, her voice full of wonder. A butterfly. Emma and Alex turned together to follow where Charlie pointed. On the windowsill, a bright yellow butterfly rested in stillness, its wings fluttering softly in the gentle breeze. It lingered there for a few seconds, as if watching the scene inside the room. Then it lifted off, drifting into the clear blue sky beyond the glass until it disappeared. Mommy Isabel sent that message, Charlie said with the certainty of a child who believes in miracles. She's so happy. She wants to tell us she agrees. She likes Emmy being my new mom. Alex held the 2 women of his life a little tighter, his eyes following the yellow butterfly until it vanished at the horizon. I think so too, sweetheart, he said, his voice deep with emotion. I'm sure Mommy Isabel is very happy. She always wanted us to be happy, and now we are. The 3 of them hugged again, this time with smiles instead of tears. Outside the window, the city of Charleston was waking into a new day. But in this room, a new life was beginning. Their story began with injustice, with a wrong decision and the tears of hurt. But it ended with happiness, with forgiveness, with a love strong enough to cross every barrier. This was a family built not by blood, but by choice. Not a love that happened by accident, but a love decided, nurtured, and protected every day. An orphan woman found the family she had dreamed of for 27 years. A man who had once locked his heart away learned how to love again. And a little girl got the mother she chose for herself. 3 hearts that had been adrift finally found where they belonged, together, forever. If this story has touched your heart, if it has made you believe in second chances, and the power of love chosen instead of accidental, then please help us spread this message to more people. Please hit the like button on this video, share it with the people you think need to hear this story, and subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss soul-stirring stories every day. We'd truly love to hear what you feel, deep in your heart. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever met people like Emma in your life? People who love sincerely but are misunderstood? Or have you ever made a mistake like Alex, believing someone else's words instead of what you saw with your own eyes? Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We're always happy to know our stories are reaching every corner of the world. Please remember that sometimes the most precious people are standing right in front of us, but pride, fear, or someone else's words can blur our ability to see them. Don't make the mistake Alex made. Treasure the people who truly love you before it's too late. Before we end, we want to send our warmest wishes to all of you watching this video. We wish you strong health, a joyful life, and peace in every single day. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our story. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.